So this is directed to integral life thinkers, and it's a presentation that I've been working on in rough, still a ways to go, on integral Mandalic theory. And so I'm just going to kind of read through it, and there will be probably a second part that I'll post at some point, but this is the beginning. Can a singular system integrate all the major components up to and including the individuated mind in a truly fractal or Mandalic way, and leave open room for that which will expand beyond the individuated mind? I believe the answer is yes, and in some profound sense, people like Ken Wilber have already completed this astonishing task. Other integrators throughout history have been plugging away at this project long before us, so a nod to the giants that have come before us is always a welcome one. However, there's always room for further upgrades and enhancements, transcend and include the model of the day, which goes to the heart of the theory which I'm presenting. My focus here will be to leave significant trails of thought, a mutated route that leads away from, but also adjacent to and deeply connected with, Wilber's system. I hope, therefore, to illustrate a Mandalic or fractal system of integrating thought. If I can do this correctly, I think the fallout will be the following: a novel twist on the lower right, or the shifting of integrating views on politics and economics, a new sense of cosmic cycles and patterns, a simplifying of the expression of how integral theorizing can be expressed, a revisioning of time, perhaps among other perspectives. Where Wilber's theory to some degree segments the different components of the system, i.e. AQUL, or all quadrants are major perspectives we inhabit, levels the stages of growth an organism transits through during its life, lines the different areas of growth we undergo, such as musical, moral, or cognitive, states the various degrees of internal exploration we all undergo throughout a day, such as waking, dreaming, and deep sleep, types pretty much everything else that cannot be fit into those categories that show patterns that are worthy of mention. To some degree, by no means completely, Wilber's system has distinct elements that aren't all that woven together. In other words, the system does not fully illustrate as to how the component parts might comprehensively fit together as integrating elements themselves. Rather, they show, and brilliantly I believe, how so much of our present-day academic knowledge and non-academic knowledge can be woven into the five component parts. This theory tries to show how these different elements, these different component parts, might be able to be fit together. Let me note, and this is a very important note I believe, I am also humbled at the integrative, inclusive, embracing scope of these theories. His vision acted as the inspirative fuel from which my own theorizing can often burn. To be clear, let me define integrating mandalas. These are patterns that are repeating but stacking, so that, and through these repeating patterns, mutated novelty can be built upon the previous structures that have been laid down. I believe, as I've noted before, this definition can be brought to the AQUL component parts, and the process of doing this is exactly one angle from which what might be called the choral code could potentially be revealed. Let me define what I mean by the first tier, because it differs from spiral dynamics' first tier, but I am also trying to integrate spiral dynamics, so this first tier is indeed a nod to their work. The first tier in this context would be the evolutionary process from the Big Bang approximately to reptiles. Note the third tier in this system is exactly equivalent in many regards to spiral dynamics' first tier. The rearrangement of definition should make good sense as we move forward. In this world, there is little more than the fight-or-flight response that is activated in the cell, so the traditional Darwinian theory works almost perfectly up to this point in developmental complexity. Again, the first tier here is the evolutionary development from the Big Bang to reptiles or thereabouts. The first tier I'm trying to express here is the movement through the process of the creation of an individuated self that is capable of survival in a hostile world. The building of the I as a primary focus. Although these beings are interfacing with others, the we, and reacting in the external world and working with it, the it, as well as within systems of objects, the its. The perspective of these early evolutionary beings are truly, as it were, narcissistically focused, bound up with itself for itself. It's in it for its own survival, and therefore the focus for this being is the I. In the external world, there is little more than the fight or flight response that is activated in these beings. So the traditional Darwinian theory, as noted, works almost perfectly. We can reflect philosophically on the idea that this is a cosmically beautiful process, the creation of a being that is able to react and cope with the survival complexities of its existence. So in this sense, it is a worthwhile process to undergo. The creation of the beautiful being becoming a self, acting in a world to survive, or the development of extraordinary levels of reactivity so that it's able to respond and react for itself in this world. Physiologically speaking, and in resonance with integral theory, this is reflected in the creation of the reptilian brainstem and associated spinal cord. There's reason to suggest that this being is only situated internally in the now, very present with what's happening, so that it is capable of reacting in the now for its own survival. In some sense, it doesn't have the pleasure to dream of the past, nor the capacity to contemplate the future, because it's too bound up with surviving in the now. It therefore is without any real sense, is in any real sense the capacity to internalize the past nor the future. Evolutionarily, all beings up to the reptile do not seem to show any real sleep, neither dreaming nor deep sleep, playing an important role. So moving forward, I believe there's a strong fractal or Mandalic connection between this root of evolution, this reptilian part of our being, and what has come to be called the Kundalini. But let's note that this Kundalini is experienced from a human perspective, which we will tackle a little bit more. So I won't get ahead of myself on that. So as we move forward, we'll go to the next tier, and this is a fractal of the purple meme, whereas the above was in some sense, I will argue, a fractal of the beige meme. So the purple meme in spiral dynamics has a more emotive context. The evolutionary development from approximately reptiles to higher mammals shows what seems to be a different focus altogether, as well as importantly different physiological differences. The mammal has a limbic system, what might be thought of as the second brain. We'll look at the three brains and the relationships a little bit more later. Also, unlike all other animals up to this point, these beings are not only involved in the waking state, but also fall into the dreaming state. The dreaming state suggests there is now memory storage and processing of the past, whereas reptiles showed more instinctive reactivity only. Mammals are both reactive and emotional, both past and present oriented. With both the reptilian brainstem and the mammalian limbic system activated, both of these are possible. All of which suggests there has been a profound transcendence and inclusion of both the more archaic inner mind experience of the reptile, as well as the kinds of social interactions and physical and behavioristic patterns. The focus, therefore, puts us into the integral quadrant system, into the we focus, and a shift away from the I focus, or the lower left. A shift from agentic, survivalistic I tendencies, in other words, to more communicative or emotive we tendencies. Now, although the focus shifts, as we move up in these major different focuses, we do get better, at least in some sense, at the previous focus also. Many mammals are actually more adaptive and hence actually more capable of surviving the complex situations that they find themselves in beyond what pre-reptile species found themselves in. One of the adaptive traits is their use of collectively dealing with issues such as a wolf pack working together to steer away dangers. Although fish do this, as well as other pre-reptile species, there's a level of intelligence in this process that isn't really there in pre-limbic system animals. There's a caveat, however. Because of their complex physiological requirements, they need more of the natural world often to maintain their survival. So in major cataclysms, there's a high-level likelihood that the higher mammals would go first because of their picky food requirements and so forth. With the onset of hominids, we, I shall argue, enter into another radically different primary focus. This time the primary focus moves to the objectification of it realities. Humans and other hominids, to a lesser degree, showed the development of a third brain, and with humans, we get the complex neocortex along with the other two brains. The three brains bundled together in the human are sometimes called the Turin brain structure. Again, unlike the other two major steps, humans include the capacities of the other brains, namely I-focused instinctual reactivity and we-focused emotive caring, but we also have a third capacity now of the upper right it, objectification. The closest we're going to get to this empirically is the exploration of Robert Kegan's work, in my opinion. So let's take a moment to dig into this cognitive development. In essence, Kegan's theory shows that the subject of one stage becomes the object of the subject of the next stage of development. That is, as perspectives develop, the previous perspective becomes something akin to a mental tool to the now more complex perceiving subject. And this new perspective is a subject until the next moment makes this perspective an object or tool for the subject. Now, although I'm going to have to twist this symbol slightly to make this work, keep this general process in mind as we move forward. Kegan uses the notion of first, second, and third person perspectives, which act brilliantly as descriptors given what he's positing and the descriptors he's using. But let us now move to a pre-modern system of thought, namely the chakras. Viewed as merely, perhaps, gestures or allegories, the best of the pre-modern systems remain as powerful mental tools for which we can reflect and find our place within the cosmos. Another reason I turn to this system at this point is the reflection it has directly on our physical body, which plays a central role in crafting what I believe to be what might become the choral code. The root chakra represents, in many systems, grounding, the sort of place from which all things come, or the origin. I'm going to now make the argument, or at least the suggestion, that in many ways this has been, at least in some limited context, the gesture that also represents nature mysticism. As I noted before, from an objective perspective, this first tier can be seen and witnessed into and is a reflection of the reptilian brainstem. And we see this in many, particularly Eastern religious systems, where the reptiles symbolic of the Kundalini. So this chakra is the dominant focus for reptiles, but plays an important role in development and what I've been calling sort of nature mysticism. And so the second chakra is essentially to do with emotive capacities, and when objectively witnessed, it arguably has something to do with the subtle realm. So as we move up, so too does our objectification of these states of consciousness. And the third one arguably is representative of the sun, or the causal ground from which all existence sort of comes, different from the root in that it is objectively witnessing its own self in that sense, I believe. And then the fourth would be something like non-dual, but we will explore this context a little bit more in the next video.